morning. It's Saturday, January 27th, and today I'm going to talk about Donald Trump. I have avoided talking about Donald Trump many times because he has done so many evil things in my mind. But I have to talk about this one. And it's not about his refusal to show his taxes after promising to show them. This is a much more serious thing that Donald Trump created. It will affect the lives of our children and grandchildren for many, many years, as well as the lives of most of us. Now, Donald Trump built a national debt that was so big, and this happened even before the pandemic, it is so big that it'll weigh down our economy for years. Donald Trump is known as the king of debt. He's a big borrower in his time and a refuser to pay off his debts in many cases. And he screwed many of the contractors that worked with him. So, when he came aboard, he promised to reduce the national debt. One of the many promises that he broke. And then he made the mistake of creating the tax cuts that made the national debt surge. Right? And he oversaw the third biggest deficit increase of any president. Other presidents had deficit increases. The magnitude of the numbers was entirely different. We weren't talking about $8 trillion. That's what Donald increased our debt by. $8 trillion. An unheard of number. Just to make you understand what $8 trillion is, that's twice as much as Americans owe on student loans, credit card, and every other debt except mortgages. That's how big $8 trillion is. Another way of putting it, which might make it more understandable for most people, is that amount of money amounts to $23,500 for every person in this country in new federal debt. Imagine that. Every person in this country now owes $23,500 because of this debt increase. Now, two presidents, Lincoln and George W. Bush, had larger debt increases, but Lincoln was fighting a civil war, and Bush had two international conflicts that he was involved in with the country. So they had a reason to raise the debt. They did not raise the debt and create a monumental tax cut. The 2017 tax cut and the lack of any serious spending restrictions helped the deficit and the debt soar. So when we got struck by the pandemic, it threw us another $3 trillion into COVID-related stimulus. And there was no longer any margin for error. So at that time, Trump should have taken action. And his action should have been a tax increase in order to cover his bad spending habits. But did he tax increase? No. And we must recognize that our national debt has reached immense levels relative to our economy. It's nearly as high as it was at the end of World War II. But unlike 75 years ago, there was no massive financial overhang from Medicare and Social Security. And the fact that those two benefit, and I will call them benefits, even though I consider that we, the working public, earn those packages, they exist, and it makes it more difficult to dig ourselves out of this trench of debt. And it opens up to our ignorant Congress an attack on those two benefits, because they believe that the American public is not entitled to those features of our society. And Donald Trump has opened up this wound by his piss-poor spending habits. So think about that. Donald Trump screwed up badly, and now this Congress is attacking the mainstay of our social environment. Those two packages, Medicare and Social Security, are now under attack again constantly because the Republicans don't feel like spending that. This was not supposed to happen because Donald Trump promised that in his term he would reduce the debt. He would reduce the ceiling. When Trump took office, he predicted that the economic growth created by the tax cut, combined with the proceeds of the tariffs that he imposed on a wide range of goods, would help eliminate the budget deficit. Well, it never happened, and we never began to pay down our debt. And Donald boasted to Sean Hannity that when this tax cut starts to really work, we'll start paying off that debt like it's water. Well, that never happened, and that water is drowning us. And the tariffs never really worked. They brought in some money, but then Trump took that money to help the farmers, so it never went against paying off the national debt. And there were tax implications associated with those tariffs, so that many who had to pay the tariffs took those off their income taxes. So the tariffs, in effect, were a zero benefit. So as it sits right now, our national debt is at the highest level relative to our economy since the end of World War II. But we know that after World War II ended, we had an economic boom. But that's not going to happen this time, because when World War II ended 75 years ago, Social Security was in its infancy and Medicare didn't exist. And today, many of our biggest and most rapidly growing expenses, especially Social Security and Medicare, are baked into the budget because of our nation's aging population. And these outlays look like in the future they are going to rise sharp. So something has to be done about that. And cutting taxes is not the way to effectively manage our Social Security and our Medicare payments. We need to have tax increases to fight that battle. So this tax cut that Donald Trump executed put us deep in the hole. In fact, his entire presidency was a financial disaster for this country. Starting with the tax cuts and continuing through the increase in the debt ceiling and another increase in the debt ceiling coming forward. And we can look back and we can blame it all on Donald Trump. Maybe that's a little bit unfair, but not much. And then we have Congress fighting desperately to cut Medicare and to cut Social Security, instead of looking at all of the tax benefits that we give away to our wealthy and our corporations. When we have 190 some odd exemptions that corporations are allowed to take in addition to the lower tax rate, we are screwing this country by leaning toward the wealthy. And Donald Trump's ignorance is the reason that we are faced with many of these problems now. So I leave you with that. Have a great day. Bye.